Hello, my name is Jamie Lowe, and the Frankfurt Film Festival has received entries from 44 countries across the world, and I'll be chatting to some of the people behind some of our winning entries. And today I'm joined by Peter J. Brown, who's behind the best documentary feature, Eco-Terrorist: The Battle for Our Planet. Now, what an incredible film this is. I couldn't take my eyes away. It was a bit like that scene in Clockwork Orange where, he's got the things that are peeling back his eyelids. It felt like that. I couldn't turn away. What an incredible life you've led. But can you just set out the sort of premise of the film that you've created?
Well, I've been involved in the environmental movement for 40 plus years. And that whole time I worked in the television business. I was a television director. And so when I went off every year to volunteer to work with Sea Shepherd, and not just Sea Shepherd, but other groups, I filmed them. And I had an archive of 40 years of the film business. And about 15 years ago, I made a film called Confessions of an Eco-Terrorist. And it was about who was the terrorist. Whether we were the terrorists or whether they were the terrorists. And I think I answered that question quite well. And this film is kind of a sequel, meaning what happens when a group like ours gets money.
And like you said, it's decades of footage that you've put together and created a narrative. It's almost chronological because you see the sort of the cameras themselves change. They get smaller and they feel more digital, and you seem to get a sort of better sound as the film progresses. But did that also change your sort of style of filmmaking? You got to grips with new technology on the different sort of missions and excursions that you went on. How did that impact you as you actually filmed it on the ground?
Well, in the television business, I was known as a distant location person. So I was always up on the new technologies, from film to I've been through like 25 formats, I think my archive has. So I'm used to going out in the field. I've been all over Africa, to Indonesia, India, China, you pretty much name it. And so I was always used to carrying my gear, and I made a lot of gear myself, so I could carry it. And back in the day, they used to call it a one-man band. And I was good at it. So I just, whatever equipment I had at the time, I took with me. And over the years, I, owned a ton of equipment, different kind of stuff. And I was always involved in getting the newest equipment because I'm not a big guy. And I used to travel places that I had to walk a week or 2 weeks, so I couldn't carry a lot of gear. So it really didn't affect me. I love the new cameras. I mean, if they were available when I was young, that would have been a lot easier. Back in the day, we'd carry 25 cases to do a film shoot in Africa. Now I can put 3 cameras or 4 cameras in one little Halliburton and be off.
And as the film progresses, you start to see other members of the crew also begin to use cameras, because what becomes a major part of this film was the different, it's the basis of the film, the different tactics you use to get in the way of people that was trying to hurt sea creatures, sea animals.
Well, back in the day, we used to call them video hits. We were a very small organization, and I was at the very beginning of the ocean environmental movement, and without the pictures, no one cared. You show a picture of a baby seal getting whacked and people cared. You show individuals or humans risking their own life to save an animal and people cared. So that was always our strategy. I was the media guy for 25 years all by myself. And you'll notice, or in my first film, War, that it was very hard for me to tell the story because I was never in it. I mean, I filmed all the stuff, but no one had a picture of me. And in my first film, you could always tell when I showed a picture of me, it was like somebody's home camera or, shaky cam or whatever it was. And then we cut to my stuff and it was professional. So, as the cameras got smaller, and quite frankly, back in the later years, Sea Shepherd signed that contract with Discovery to do Whale Wars. All of a sudden they had 10 cameras. And at that time, I wasn't even allowed to bring my camera because I was competing with the television station or a television people, and therefore I was in a lot of it. I was, for the first 3 or 4 years, I was one of the stars. They made me the jerk.
You mentioned you only appearing very briefly in the earlier parts of the film. I'm thinking about one scene with a bucket, but we'll let the viewers go and find out.
Well, back in the day, that's what we used. Our original
Yeah.
boats were scraps. They shouldn't have gone out of the harbor, really, let alone go halfway across the ocean and whack into a big Japanese trawler. So there were times we didn't have water. There were times when nothing worked. And, as we used to flush the toilets with a bucket, sometimes we had to use them.
So there's a few moments of the film that I want to ask you about, and you've already hinted towards two of them already. And one of the more sort of brutal moments in the earlier part of the film, which is when I sort of felt like I was, Clockwork Orange style viewing this film, which is really where I was sunk into it, is you show sort of the brutality of the SEAL killing, and you show the sort of almost fist fights that you have with the people that you were trying to stop. What was your thinking in, showing the brutality of this film? Was it important to draw people in and give them a reason to support the Sea Shepherds? Because, there's not always full 360 support for environmentalist campaigners.
Well, we were doing extreme things. We were taking boats to extreme places. We were using volunteer crews of one time we picked up a bunch of street kids in London because we didn't have a crew. So in order to explain to people why someone would do something, one has to show some of the brutality. Quite frankly, in environmental films, I try to show as little brutality as I can because no one wants to see an animal get whacked. But on the other hand, you have to make the point that there is something important going on, and it is worth someone like myself who had a job and a couple kids and a house in the suburbs to go out and spend 4 or 5 months a year getting arrested, I did it for free. So you need to show some brutality in order to get people to know what is actually happening.
Yeah, and I think that's the moment of the film where I really understood what you were doing there. And one of the more shocking parts of the film is that the laws weren't enforced by the governments of that particular area of sea that you were in. And even in some cases, the local Coast Guard and sort of police on the water were attempting to block you from stopping this cruelty towards the sea life.
Oh, of course. I mean, Jacques Cousteau said long ago that if the navies of the world just did something to save the oceans, we wouldn't be in this trouble instead of playing petty little war games. Look at Europe now. I mean, what is the sense of war and all these armies and navies that we have if it isn't to protect the one thing that's really important to people, the earth? If we don't protect the earth, there is not going to be a place for our children or our grandchildren. And it was always you against the government. Government is like big business, is like big corporations. They're out for themselves. Anyone who gets in their way should be arrested. Well, I've been arrested a few times. And quite frankly, I met some of my nicest friends in jail. So if you're in jail for a cause, I think it's all the better. Everyone should be there. We should all stand up now about Ukraine. I mean, we should not allow that kind of stuff to happen. I mean, first of all, you destroyed a country, people, for what reason? What's going to gain from that? Nothing is going to be gained. And governments, let's face it, are kind of stupid.
Well, yes, especially in my home country, we've definitely got a questionable front bench of politicians, that's for sure. So
we had Trump.
Well, yeah, and him. There's one particular moment of the film that was, as a guy that's quite into boats, I live in a port town in England. The Ada Gill, is it Ada Gill? The incredible Gill, yeah. this $3 million boat that came to quite a dramatic end. Luckily, the crew were okay, but that was sort of one of the more dramatic moments of the film, let's say. But like you said, the way that the sort of things like that turned into video hits, you lost a $3 million boat, but you gained a massive amount of press attention.
Of course, that's the idea. That is why you're out there. You're out there in a little boat with 30 people fighting a battle for the whole world, really. And if you don't tell people, if people don't know what's going on, nothing is going to be accomplished. So in order to get, nowadays with internet, you get these pictures all over. But back in the day, you know, if we didn't get on the CBS Evening News or the BBC Evening News, you didn't happen. So our whole thing was what we used to call, Bob Hunter, the founder of Greenpeace, came up with the idea, the video hits. We used to do something so dramatic that we would get on the news, and therefore we could make our point. If you're not on the news, you couldn't make your point.
And talk to me about the Faroe Islands, because you were really battling against a lot of different sort of outside forces there, particularly the people of the island nation that had sort of been brainwashed into thinking what was going on there was okay.
Well, I don't know if they were brainwashed. We kind of call them inbred cretins, but
yeah, I didn't want to say that myself.
It's very difficult to understand how humans can be so brutal, especially in this day and age. In the Faroe Islands, their own studies, scientific studies, have said that the eating of whale meat and their fish products is lowering and diminishing the mental capacity of their children because of the mercury intake. They know that. They've done the studies. Yet they think that because it's tradition, they can do it. And you know, the rest of the world disagrees. I mean, Faroe Islands belong to Denmark. What the heck is Denmark doing? I mean, they're part of the EU. Why aren't they doing something about it? It shouldn't be allowed. They slaughter these whales, and nowadays they're so poisoned, they really don't eat them anymore. They used to give them away at one time, years ago. I mean, years and years ago, they probably used to eat them, and they still do. They give them out to people. And when I was there one time, this guy had his pregnant daughter come over and eat some in front of me. I mean, geez, that's like injecting her with poison, in my opinion. So you have to, the Faroe Islands they're still fighting it. People are still fighting the Faroe Islands whale kill. And it's not a kill, it's a slaughter. It's a party is what it is. And I guess when you live on a little rock and in the middle of summer, someone calls you up and you get all your buddies go down to get drunk and go whack a few whales, I guess it seems like fun. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it tradition, but headhunting was a tradition. It's no longer. I said, so I think that the Faroe Islands whale slaughter, they call it the grind, is way past its time. You know, Americans used to slaughter their natives. I wasn't for it. I wasn't around. Wasn't necessarily my relatives. You can blame me for World War II. Mine came from Germany. So but it is something whose time has passed. We humans have to realize as the future comes, we have to change, and certain things should be eliminated, period.
Okay, so that's going to give people a good sense of the content of the film. But like we mentioned, this is this is a lot of footage. This is a lot of film that's been captured over many, many years. Was it easy to put together? Because I know when I'm tasked with looking back at sort of my filmography, which isn't all necessarily about the same subject, especially not at all, but yours was, did that make it easier to compile this massive amount of footage into sort of narrative that flowed?
Well, it's never easy. Editing is like a giant jigsaw puzzle without cuts that you have to put together. I had hours and hours and hours and hours of films. So, but I shot most of them. So I remember things I shot. And when it came time to make my film, I wanted to make a point. I wanted to make a point that Sea Shepherd was founded from Greenpeace, because we thought they were spending too much money on office buildings and doing nothing. Well, in a way, Sea Shepherd, not in a way, but really Sea Shepherd has become Greenpeace to me. I'm no longer with them. They sued me for saying that. They sued me for this film after working for them for free for 40 years, after running it for a while out of my checkbook back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, groups like governments, they want their money. I did it for free. I think people who do something important almost have to do it for free, because money will corrupt you. Someone will come up with money. And if you need the money, if you need the job, you will do what they want. And my thing was always, there isn't next year. I don't want to wonder what we're going to do next year. I get paid in the television business. I get paid for something else. I want this over. I'm away from my children. I'm away from my home. That boat was not a lovely boat to live on. Nowadays, they're
No, I
gorgeous.
saw.
But back in the day, we ate rice and beans, period. And we drank one time World War II surplus water because we ran out. And if that
Oh,
isn't
wow.
bad, I'll tell you. And so, you have to realize that, environmental people who fight for causes have to fight for causes. Look what's happening in the Ukraine. The people are fighting the huge Russian giant. And why? Because they believe in freedom. They believe in their country, and you won't beat them. I mean, they might run over them. We got run over millions of times, but they never beat us.
Mm. And you mentioned sort of Greenpeace standing. It's something that you addressed early on in the film, that holding a sign and standing in front of an embassy or a government building isn't really going to do anything. So what you did, and what a lot of the crew did, is use their own skills to sort of contribute to the cause. So you were there to capture all the footage, to get it out to press. You were there to, be the media vehicle for this.
I also drove the boat and fixed
Oh, did
everything.
you sometimes?
And I did everything. So everybody did. There are, I have a lot of skills and I use them to the utmost of my ability. The young people, mostly young people, there are older people that do volunteer. The young people have no skills often, or no boating skills, but they can learn to do things. And because they are so dedicated, because they are so willing to work, we had no complaints in the old days. And now, on the last trip I went to Antarctica, people were complaining about the food. I said, food? We have food. What are you talking about? You have to realize that if you're going to fight for a cause, it is a fight. And, you have to give it your all. And then when it's done, you go home and live your life and maybe wake up again and have to fight it again. That's just the way things are.
And would you encourage aspiring documentarians and filmmakers alike to find a cause, to inspire them to get out there and make it, or find something in their life that they care about and make a film about that?
I encourage everyone to find a cause, and whether they're a filmmaker, a writer, a school teacher, or whatever they might be, to use their skills to promote that cause. There are causes out there, children hungry. I mean, all over the world, there are causes, and we need all the people with skills, and people have them. Everybody has them. Most people are just too lethargic, or they just don't care. They don't think they can do anything. Well, this world was changed by individuals. And back in history, right up to this day, is changed by individuals. And so if individuals can't get off their couch and stop watching television, excuse me, then we're not going to have change. The only time change comes is when people usually get so pissed off that they get up and do something. Then they talk to their neighbors, they talk to their friends, they gather a group, and all of a sudden they can make a difference. Everyone has it in them to make a difference. I just encourage everyone to, filmmakers alike.
You mentioned earlier about sort of being at the forefront of technology, and what we're seeing a lot of now is we talk about cinema verite, and a lot of it's happening right now in front of our eyes via, live broadcasting. And you've managed to pull off some live broadcasting from some very interesting locations, haven't you?
Yes, we did live broadcasting from Antarctica. I'm doing an orca project up in Washington State, which we were live broadcasting. It doesn't exist, but if it could, then the idea is to encourage others and to motivate people who do have the skills to use their head, think outside the box, and try things. When you're working for free, you can try anything you want. There is no failure. It's just, a test. So I do believe in this day and age, now there are cameras everywhere. You walk around London, your picture's taken 50 times a day. Now, I believe in privacy, and I'm not so crazy about all that. But the bottom line is, we see a lot more today than we ever saw. And it's because everyone has a camera, and they're shooting the amount of pictures people shoot with their iPhones or Samsung, whatever they are, or Pixels or whatever, is just filling up the internet. And whether it's true or not, a lot of it isn't. The problem is we actually had a mission and we did fake news. Not totally fake news, but we encouraged using our video hits to make people care. And at times I wasn't as honest as I might be. And but you know, quite frankly, I wasn't trying to sell the truth.
Yeah.
I was trying to sell a cause, and the cause was that we must protect the animals in order to protect ourselves. And we, as a human species, were not taking care of our home, and our home is planet Earth.
Now, in the early days, I imagine you were sort of working in a more analog capacity on, I mean, I think from what I saw, the boat's got a bit more sort of amenable, you know, there's a bit more, few more amenities towards, you know, the more recent years spent on the water. So what was that like? Because, you know, were you working with film? How did it work? You know, going through a rough sea, exposed to the elements with all this kit that, you know, as well as you know, I know as well as you know, that film kit generally, especially the high-end film kit, doesn't really do well when it's bracing the elements.
Well, you have to realize people paid me to do this over the years, not for Sea Shepherd, but in television. I was the guy that went to the top of the mountain. I was the guy that went to the North Pole. I was a guy that went through the jungles. I was a guy who, you know, sat for 3 days trying to film this or trying to film that. And I used to it. I had my own kit. I had everything was specially made for me. I made special bags. I had special clothes. I had everything that I had from my business. Nowadays, it's quite easy. Everybody can put a camera in your pocket. You can take your cell phone out. I have a cell phone with a waterproof case, and if I had that, I could have done a lot more because it would have been a lot easier for me to trip through the jungle if I had a couple of them. But back then you didn't. So you did what you could do. And back in the day of film, heck, you had to shoot every minute cost you, you know, $1,000. So you had to think about what you shoot. Now I call it monkeys with cameras. You know, give somebody a camera and they turn it on, and 50 hours later, you know, you have to go, somebody has to go look at that. I used to tell the kids, you know, somebody has to look at this, turn the damn camera off. You know, you don't realize what editing is. I mean, the Whale Wars television show had hours and hours and hours of footage that they had, you know, they kept editors working forever. I kind of came from the school of you tell the story in your head and you film it so that you can tell the story. So I could do back in the day with 12 or 15 rolls of film, which is what, there were 10 minutes a roll. Anyhow, an hour and a half of film or 2 hours of film, I could do a television show. Now, the Faroe Islands, we had 50 hours, and that was back in the day when people didn't even have all these cameras. Nowadays, they probably have 1,000 hours of footage that somebody has to look at. And just because you have a lot of footage, it's very nice to get that plumb shot, but it's oftentimes you miss it because it's just too much footage. I think it's very important, at least the older filmmakers that I know, they tell the story. I'm a director. I'll tell the story in my head and I'll get the pictures as a cinematographer to cover that story. Even today, I don't just run a camera. I don't come back with hours of footage. I come back with, you know, as much as I need to do a film. You know, I did real TV. I produced Entertainment Tonight, a show called Real People. You know, I did work for the BBC. I did work for the ZDF, the ARD. I was the guy that did the work that was sent out, and I had to come home with a story. And it's very important to have the story as a director. Nowadays, the kids just shoot pictures. Oftentimes, they don't even think of what they're shooting.
I'll fix it in post. I'll fix it in the edit. All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they'll fix it, and they can't. I mean, sometimes they can, but that's a huge job to fix it in the edit. Once you come to fix it in the post, then you've made a mistake, in my opinion. And that's where I still think I'm somewhat head and shoulders above a lot of these kids out there that someone would hire to do a film, because I will go and come back with the story, not just a bunch of footage, but I'll tell the story. I'll know what the story is. I'll have an opinion about how it should be told. And who knows, things change, it's like war, after the first shot, the plan goes to hell. But you go out with a story. We always in the day, we used to go out with a story in our head, and we would try to tell that story.
Stellar advice there. Now, you've mentioned that you've worked for almost every acronym in the broadcasting world, but what do you do outside of that? Because there must be more to your efforts than just creating films that tell people.
Well, that was my job. I was in the Directors Guild of America, DGA, for 39 years or something. I'm retired now from that. I just do environmental work. I have a group, like I said, we're up there protecting orcas. We're doing reefs in Hawaii. I'm working on a Costa Rican project. But I often bring my skills to bear on those, although now everybody just wants me to drive a boat and be a pain in the ass. It's much more fun than being the film guy, to drive a boat and be a pain in the ass. But, I try to teach the kids that is important to tell a story. And that is everything. And you just can't shoot footage. Somebody has to pay attention.
And with that, then, what's next? Have you got anything you're working on, or is it purely working with NGOs and driving boats now?
Oh, if somebody called me up to make a film, I live on Social Security and volunteer around the world. So, I'm not a wealthy man. I mean, people say to me, gee, you must be loaded to do what you. No, I'm not, I made some good money in the past, but went through, divorce and everything. And I don't need much, but I am working with a group in Costa Rica to save their national parks, to protect the Cocos Island. And that's what I'm presently doing. And I have a boat up in Washington State that's protecting orcas that we're shutting down, just because, you can only do so much. We're a small group. We're all volunteers. My group, Gaia Network, it's called, is all volunteers. The whole money thing, as you can see in my film, it's just not for me. I mean, it's great if you make a film to go to a film festival, have all the girls love you, do the get the press, stand in front of the red carpet, do all the things you want to do. But if you're trying to do a mission, you're trying to change humanity, it's not easy. It is hard work. And there is no room, in my opinion, for all the glory. The glory just gets you glory, and it doesn't get the job done.
There we go. Peter J. Brown, your film, our best documentary feature is Eco-Terrorists, The Battle for Our Planet. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. And thank you to you at home for watching. Be sure to check out the Frankfurt Film Festival website for more details on our winners and, of course, their fantastic films.